Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community.
A very good morning and warm welcome to Money Sense. I'm Simon Cawdery and I'm delighted to be joined in the studio this morning by Brandon Caruana. Brandon is the CEO of Tenet Bank, which is a CIMA licensed Class B bank here in the Cayman Islands. As well as CEO of Tenet, Brandon is also the co-founder of Code Cayman. Now, what's today's show going to be about? The clue was in Code Cayman. We're going to be talking a little bit about technology, artificial intelligence and coding. And that might sound at 7:30 in the morning a little bit scary. So, Brandon, first of all, a very good morning to you and welcome to Money Sense.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. What in your mind, and when people hear the word artificial intelligence, people hear the word coding, people's minds can go in all sorts of weird and wonderful directions. So, what would you like people to think of when they hear of artificial intelligence, and what should it mean? What do you think it should mean to people when they're thinking about it?
I think it probably means different things to different. It means different things based on what you're doing at any given point in time. But in effect, I think it's probably the best assistant you can ever have on like a research side, on an analysis side, for like cost per minute that you've got to do these activities. Currently, I don't think it's something that can go get you a coffee and kind of get your day-to-day chores done. But certainly, as you explore the world, I would suggest instead of maybe using Google, I would start using a ChatGPT or a Gemini model to start exploring kind of that data set and that information.
I think perhaps a lot of people, when they think about artificial intelligence, they think of things like Terminator, or they think of Hollywood sci-fi type of images, and it scares them a little bit. And then you mentioned something there, ChatGPT, which when you use it is the opposite of scary in so many ways because it's a friendly interface. Are people right, though, from a strategic perspective? We can talk about how to use it today, but are people potentially right or about the long-term implications of where this might go? How do you address that concern in people's mind?
I mostly just try and decide how it can fit in my day-to-day life and worry about the things that can affect me. The long-term implications are probably things that I think about when I think of capital allocation and how to deploy it and make sure that it's a tool for growing a business or growing whatever it is you're trying to build, whether it's in your day-to-day job or whether it's in you're running the company. But currently it's not. It's nowhere near some Skynet, Terminator type situation, Matrix, and I would think as I read different papers and do different research, I would think that it'll sort of align with some sort of incentive model, and that incentive model will be to grow the economy and work alongside kind of economic values that we already have.
One of the things that I'd like to ask you about OpenAI, the apparently not-for-profit organization in the States, which is one of the developers behind, one of the owners behind ChatGPT models. Their mission in many ways is about developing this for humanity, but it's sort of a very open-ended mission, isn't it? So I take your point that we should focus on where we are today, but the potential is this. When you think about how AI has evolved in 5 years, another 50. That could be a dramatic difference to what we are experiencing today, and that doesn't trouble you in any sense, or you'll be happy not to be around in 50 years and take that problem away.
No, it does not trouble me. I think it'll work alongside people and the system that we've all built and kind of developed over time. I think it'll take a lot of the burden off of all of the inefficiencies and inadequacies and inequalities that we currently have. I think it'll bring the cost of production dramatically down. I think through research and scientific discovery, empowered by and working alongside with AI, you'll probably see the cost of energy start to plummet and new scientific discoveries come out, which are for the net benefit of humanity. So no, I think if you look back at the Industrial Revolution, you had a similar mindset and a similar, people were scared that these machines were going to take over. I think the same concept holds true here. We will adapt. People adapt to whatever it is we build.
Do you think it's of the same or perhaps greater in terms of meaningfulness as like something like the Industrial Revolution? It's of that scale for for what humanity can evolve and become to?
I think it's probably a magnitude greater, exponentially greater than what the Industrial Revolution was.
And so that sort of raises the question in my mind. A lot of people, I think you said quite rightly that humanity is far better off because of the Industrial Revolution than it was before. But equally, there's a transition period, isn't there? And we'll perhaps talk about Cawdery in this context. But people have knowledge that is focused on what is right for the job they're doing today. That job today could easily no longer be needed to be done by a human in the future. So how do we, people listening to this show, how do we prepare ourselves to adapt for this upcoming technology or AI revolution?
I think maybe an example would be helpful. And if we look at like different industries that sprung up around the internet, if you would have told me, 15 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, that a main job would have been content creator and social media influencer and creating videos and pictures. And, a lot of people think, oh, it's just taking pictures and, but there's actually a lot of work in kind of doing it, right? It's not just take a picture, put it on Instagram, or take a video and put it on TikTok. You got to curate it, edit it, make sure it speaks to an audience that you want to particularly appeal to. And I would say that they're spending, 10, 15 hours per day, just focusing on kind of building that audience and building that thing. So I can't predict what the job will be, or what jobs will come from it, but I'm like, as certain as I could possibly be that there will be jobs. They'll just be different. They'll just be like social media influencers, but something new.
Our favorability amongst millennials is going up, as you're saying that there's so much work involved in being a social media influencer. That's probably never been said before on Money Said. But I want to dwell on that a little bit more, because there are roles or functions that artificial intelligence is very good at, and there are things it's not so good at. So when we look at the things it's very good at, that obviously has a concern for those people who are currently doing those sorts of roles. And so where do you think, perhaps you could help us understand what artificial intelligence is very good at, so that we can better know whether we might ourselves need to do some training, do some re-education in certain areas. Perhaps explain to us where artificial intelligence is so skilled and why it's so skilled at those things.
I think if we just narrow the conversation to like a large language model like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, it's very good at predicting the next word in a sentence, right? That's effectively what it's good at. We've introduced the ability for it to search the web, understand information, and then put those sentences and that analysis work together. But effectively, what it's doing is sort of associating words with each other and then predicting the next one in the chain. You can call that thought. You can call that, statistical anomalies of how to order words in a certain in a sentence and make sure that it strings together intelligently. I mostly think that's the beginning of thought. If you have kids and you think of your kids when they're 1 year old, or but before they're 5-year-old and they're just learning to speak, and you look through kind of that lens, we're probably building systems that are going through that same trajectory. And as you said earlier, 5 years ago, it was like, ChatGPT 2, I think at that point in time, couldn't really string together 5 paragraphs. Now it can string together, a 40-page essay or a 10-page essay or whatever, if you kind of go back and forth and work with it. But beyond sort of those things, there's so much other research that's happening, right? That's sort of the sort of public-facing, consumer-facing side, these LLMs that you speak with. There's huge research happening with, market management, liquidity management, and sort of other areas of focus that I think are just as good and just as relevant. And the hive mind, the centralized machine, will start using those tools as well and start interfacing and creating.
So some of the things you said there sort of led me to think of customer service desks. I was going to say in the old days, but only 10, 15 years ago, it was a huge industry of setting up big banks of people in front of computers, answering questions, and it was the outsourcing industry. But that was very much, someone phones up and says, I've got a problem, and the human tries to figure out what they really mean by that. But from what you're saying, a large language model is going to be infinitely better than most humans at being able to do that. And so something like those sorts of jobs are potentially at risk. Those where it's simple answers to questions that people have. Those are jobs that genuinely are at risk. Then presumably,
I would say in the near term, for sure. Certainly, if I was designing a help desk right now, I would probably just focus on hiring, on just integrating into large language models, focusing on like systems integration between a phone call to the computer and having them start to communicate with, and maybe have one human kind of monitoring all the chats from there. But just because I think these conversations tend to go into everything's, what jobs are going to go away. Maybe the counterpoint that I would make is that as kind of this AI starts to scale up, people are focused on, or like capital allocators, venture capitalists, private equity, things like that. They're focused on, investing in, or they're starting to predict that the first one-person billion-dollar company is probably coming, and that one person will have used AI and blockchains and whatever else in that infrastructure, tied that system engineering together, and then created all of this value as one person. Well, if I'm assuming that if that's in the next 5 years, that's probably like a PhD MIT grad or something like that. But the counter to that is, well, maybe, a team of 2 or 3 friends can use the same concepts to build a $1 million company or a $5 million company. You just kind of got to dig in, and this is the time to do it. If you were to start doing social media influencing 7, 8, 9, 10 years ago, you'd have amassed a huge audience and really would have figured out the game very early. If you start saying to yourself, in Cayman, there's no reason why we shouldn't be. But if you start saying to yourself, hey, me and a couple of friends are going to start figuring a tool that's powered by, ChatGPT or AI, we could probably create $1 million worth of value, or 5 or 10. Certainly if a PhD is going to create $1 billion, we should be some magnitude of that.
I was listening to you saying that, and I was thinking to myself, how many inefficiencies we see in our day-to-day lives, whether it be you go to a shop or you experience something online and you get a frustration because of it. And it's sort of what you're saying is it should be possible for people to be able to use tools such as large language models to, when they identify, as the human does, identify an inefficiency and say, hey, can we use these tools to potentially solve such inefficiencies and create improved efficiencies? And that's something that everyone can do, because we all experience life. And anytime you see something or experience something that causes you angst because it's not working efficiently, or because the other side isn't getting what you're trying to say, that's ripe for a solution theoretically.
100%. I think as you go through your day, you're gonna. I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head. As you go through your day, you're going to find a bunch of things that you think this could be tweaked and be a little bit better, or this can be tweaked and be a little bit better. And I think if you interface, if you use ChatGPT, do some research with it hand in hand, then you'll probably come up with a solution. It can write the code. It can deploy the code if there needs to be code. That doesn't necessarily need to be code. It can spitball ideas with you and brainstorm and take you down different roads until such time that you're like, oh, that's it. Let me test that in the real world now and see if you're creating value in other people's lives by having this augmented reality or intelligence.
And you mentioned, we're going to take a break in about a minute or two. You mentioned code. So perhaps immediately people's sort of hair on the back of their neck goes, oh, I've got to learn to code. I've got to learn to do these things. Is that, and we will talk after the break about Code Came Out, about how people can learn. But is it true or not that in order to use these tools, you need to code? It doesn't seem as though that's necessarily the case.
I think the new programming language, and to your point, right, like writing software can be intimidating, and you got a whole new syntax and new way to think and do stuff. I would say the new way to code is English speaking, right?
So we're automatically at an advantage by
yes,
arguably speaking English.
Well, sorry, I shouldn't have said it. I was using any sort of language at this point in time, but it's just communication now.
Yeah.
It's broken down to explaining your problem set and explaining what you think your solution set is, working with the artificial intelligence to create a solution for it. First, I would start, as with any problem set, start with defining the problem, start with research, ask it to solve the problem. If it requires a coding element, ask it to build the code. It'll build it.
So
ask it how to
a large language model can actually build code. So you have this idea of a business, and someone says, or something says, you need to write some code to make this happen. You could actually go to the model and ask it, please write some code to make this happen for me.
You can. you if your idea is big and complex, it can write it, but you're going to bang your head against the wall trying to debug it, right? So you will need a level of expertise still today. But if your idea was a little smaller of a complication set, you can certainly get the ChatGPT or any of them to build the code base and deploy it. So it just really is a question of how big your problem set is. If it was like, hey, create a contact us form that routes to these 15 people based on some logic. If you need help with this, email this person. If you need help with that, email this person. Yeah, you basically you need no interaction whatsoever, and it can build all that for you.
Well, I'm going to have to take a brief break to digest what you've just said there. I might never need to know. I'm worried I might have to start not learning to code now because I can use the models to do so. So let's take a brief break and then join Brandon again talking about large language models, AI and such like in a few seconds.
Hi, I'm Kathy Miller. Join me on Radio Cayman's Business Buzz every Tuesday and Thursday from 7:30 to 9 a.m. and the second and fourth Thursday of each month from 8:15 to 9 a.m.
Radio Cayman's Business Buzz.
If you're a business owner
or part of one, Business Buzz is your source for the latest initiatives, developments, and varied viewpoints from the local business landscape. Be part of the Business Buzz with me, Kathy Miller, every Tuesday and Thursday morning on Radio Cayman.
The Business Buzz. This is
Money Sense, bringing an informed financial perspective to the Cayman community. Brought to you by the CFA Society Cayman Islands.
And now, more Money Sense.
Welcome back to Money Sense, where I'm joined in our discussion on large language models, artificial intelligence and such like by Brandon Caruana from Tenet Bank and also from Co-Cayman. And we are going to come to that. In the first half of the show, Brandon, you've mentioned things like ChatGPT, Gemini. There's been a little bit of news over the last couple of weeks about other models out there, and I wanted to get your take on this because first and foremost, when one is naive about these things, the very nature, there is something. Okay, great, so I should use ChatGPT, and then the press comes out and says, this is next greatest best thing. How does one know which model or which system or which piece of software to use? Are there differences that we should be aware of, or are they all? And Musk came out 2 days ago, XAI, and said mine's much better. How do we know which one we should be using?
I think the important thing is if you're not using it on a daily basis at this point in time, just pick one and don't worry about the nuanced differences between them. They're all. I know in the media it's always like some competitive. This one's 5% better here. Who cares? The point is to start working with it.
It's still infinitely better than doing nothing, as you're saying.
Yeah. So if you're new to it or if it's a foreign concept, I would just, for the sake of the conversation, download ChatGPT and just start using it. Maybe a tip that I always give people that are new is don't use Google for a whole day and just use ChatGPT. Like anytime, and everybody uses Google 100 times, a day. Literally don't pull up Google. Just go to the ChatGPT app or chatgpt.com or XAI, whatever you want, right? But for the sake of the conversation, just go to ChatGPT, and any question that you were going to ask Google, ask ChatGPT. Don't ask Google for a whole day. And I think you'll find the result set infinitely better than the number of blue links that you have to scroll through and kind of continually go through. And then the other thing I always encourage people to do is open up if you download ChatGPT, open up the voice app and just talk to it and debate with it and just have a human conversation with it, and you will be shocked and excited and blown away by the level of interaction. You can interrupt it halfway through. It's a full conversation like you were talking to anybody else.
And so on your phone, just let me make sure I got this right. On your phone, you download the ChatGPT app and you start talking to your phone, and it will then have an intelligent conversation back with you. Okay.
I debate with it in the car on the drive to work every day, or almost every day. That's
both mind-blowing, worrying, and exciting, all wrapped into one sentence. I don't know. I would absolutely try this. This is extraordinary. Things you learn. So, talking about large language models, then, is that doesn't seem to be the sort of the end game for artificial intelligence. That's sort of almost like an intermediary step right now. or how do you see these things evolving? I mean, what? So we got ChatGPT 3, then ChatGPT 4, then 5. What will the next versions be? Will they just be quicker, smarter, or will there be something more meaningful that we can't, or can we even predict it?
Currently, ChatGPT is basically brute forcing, itself into kind of existence with GPU, CPU, and compute kind of going. I think what's coming is just pretty much the abstraction of all user interface, all AI. It'll sort of just be present as you kind of have your AirPods in, as you're on a Teams meeting, as you're going about daily life. It's probably just something that kind of fades away into the background, and just is kind of always available for you to access. You don't have to go to a website. You don't have to open an app. It'll just be kind of available through voice and audio. And
it would just be almost like a virtual assistant that's sitting on your shoulder, solving problems or assisting you whenever you need it, sort of thing.
Yeah, I think that's basically where to go. And then I also think that most tech is starting to converge around the industry, around AI, around this vertical. So if you slotted tech into a number of verticals, you'd probably say there's like the AR, VR, social media, AI, blockchain, crypto, life sciences, and sort of all of them are going to start converging down towards having AI kind of be in the middle of everything.
In your day-to-day life, you help run a financial organization, a bank, in fact. And financial services is arguably the most important sector here in the Cayman Islands, or unarguably, I think is probably the better way of phrasing it. So when you talk about AI, what sort of use cases or what sort of examples are there, or is the financial service sector ironically very slow to be adopting these sort of things because of some of the legacy issues? So maybe talk us a little bit about where Cayman could get to in terms of using this technology to actually help its industry.
Well, I think you can go up and down sort of the players in the industry from government and regulation. There's a great report out of the Bank of Canada that basically simulates policy changes to macroeconomic environments versus and liquidity ratios that banks and financial institutions have, which is basically saying it's the paper itself is basically saying, hey, we've created this simulation environment using reinforced learning, and then we tweak kind of the parameters, and it kind of predicts what will happen on liquidity markets and outputs a policy from there. So I think implementing things like that, or experimenting, I should say, sort of research and systems like that would be net beneficial.
And what about risk management? Because it seems to me one of the things that financial services are very good at doing is producing huge amounts of data. And one of the things humans are very bad at doing is interpreting huge amounts of data.
Yeah. So on risk management side, like there's research papers and sort of systems. There's an open source system called Mars, outputted by Microsoft, or produced and published by Microsoft. It's a unified financial market simulation engine. So you can basically run a economic environment in it and say, here's what my financial institution's liquidity ratios are. Here's the capital we have. Here's the exposure in FX. And you can basically simulate your day or your month or your game plan, right? So stress test what you're about to do. So like all of these large institutions, these large research bleeding edge tech companies are producing a volume of research that if you sit down and start putting a team towards just keeping up to date with it and testing proof of concepts with it, and then trying to see if you can implement it, that's probably the best case for the financial sector to start adopting. I would caution and say, like, don't let systems make decisions yet. So anywhere I would implement, whether it's in my personal life, whether you've thought about putting it into a company, I do not let AI make decisions on my behalf, or in fact, I wouldn't let it make decisions for.
Do you think there'll be a time in the future when you might, though?
Yeah, pretty soon. I mean, if you see it on Wall Street with high frequency trading, algorithms are already making decisions on capital. I don't know. I think those are still rule-based algorithms that you can kind of predict. Large language models go into a little bit of a black box and come out the other side. So I don't know that I'm personally uncomfortable letting it make a decision at this point in time.
But not far away, perhaps.
I don't think it's far away.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, if we can, about Code Cayman. I was somewhat unfamiliar with that until a few months ago, and ignorant on my part. But talk to me about what it is, why it is, because that I think will help people understand a bit more about it. So, what is Code Cayman? Why does it exist?
Code Cayman is a nonprofit in Cayman. We put on free tech literacy programs. Mostly the ambition is to break the barrier so that people don't find technology as scary and difficult as they may perceive it to be. It started as trying to help people break the barrier into kind of the coding world and giving resources and making sure they had access to people that knew how to program. So just break that kind of glass wall. And then beyond that, rather
than the strange geeks over there and the somewhat human people over
here.
There. Yeah.
Over here. Yeah. And so kind of just breaking down that wall and making sure that everybody had access. All the programs were free. The entire nonprofit is funded by great sponsors on the island, all listed on the website. Jason Nira is now he's the managing director. He does a phenomenal job of getting involved in the community and getting involved with Cayman's youth and making sure that we go to the schools and provide programs directly.
So this is not just for school kids, though. This is you're absolutely helping school kids break down the barriers from knowing nothing about coding to knowing something. But, and I'm sort of looking slightly in the mirror here, adults could go to one of your courses and begin to break down some of the barriers and some of the ignorance that's obviously apparent from the questions I'm asking. But is that so anyone can go, literally anyone can attend one of these courses, correct?
Yeah, the courses are constantly announced on LinkedIn, on Instagram. We have an AI. It so happens we have an AI course coming up on March 4th. The reception for that has been huge. It filled up, and then we expand it to how many people we could take on. Found another venue, so I think it's up. I think we had to cap it. Couldn't keep getting more space, but it's entirely full, and we're pretty excited. We have some great people speaking at that. So it's mostly. And there's constantly courses being announced. I think there's 4 running right now every month.
And the sort of courses, programming like Python language skills. What sort of courses are we talking about?
Build your first website. There's women code, so we can kind of just make sure that it's easier, and no men getting.
Don't get the stereotypical.
Yeah, it's just not the male nerds.
Yes.
We have a great Excel program. That's probably one of our most popular courses. I find that data point interesting. But yeah, we have a website, how to build a website program. And then we have several, during the summertime, we have youth summer camps, all free. We have youth after school programs, all free. And then, just any sort of other course that people want to teach that have some technology relevance or some program they want to kind of teach, then we're happy to put it on.
Imagine I was a hypothetical person who was listening to this and saying, I think what you're saying about needing to know a bit more about artificial intelligence, about language models, about coding, I agree with you, but I don't know anything about it. Which course should they... What should they first? What would you guide them to first do? Would it be a Python course? Would it be go to your AI course? What would be the first step you'd recommend someone to take?
To just get involved with AI, I'd probably suggest not taking a course to start with. The first thing I would do is download ChatGPT and just try it. And when I say try it, the interface is intuitive. It's got a text box. You type in it, and when you get your first response, it is a eye-popping moment. When you're like, oh, let me ask it another question on that response. And it responds. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a text message conversation effectively. Then you expand that to talking to it verbally or orally. And then you can expand that to sharing your screen if you were, working on let's say you're analyzing the Apple financials. You just share your screen and get on a Teams call with it.
So it will just... So you're saying... Coding's important, but does a first step just use the damn thing?
First step, just use it. Like, I don't think anyone's intimidated by using Google anymore. I would say go use it the same.
I could point to my mother, but she might not thank me for saying that. But I'm hoping that my parents might visit again over in the coming 12 months. I might send her one of your AI courses, and that you might then find the user who is still befuddled by the whole thing afterwards. But that's a different story. Any last messages? You said just use the product. Are there any other things that people should be thinking about when they come to this? Any other tools that people should be trying to use? Any other research? Any books or websites people should be reading to learn more about this subject, other than Code K-Man's website, obviously?
I think if I go down a path of like saying here's other resources, people might get a little too, I got to go do that work first, and so I'm just gonna cut it off and say no. Just download ChatGPT. And literally skip Google for a day or 3 hours. Like pick half a day if you need to. Pick 4 hours. Just anytime you think of a question, skip Google, go straight to ChatGPT, see if it gives you the answer first.
Love it. That is as clear and as crystal and concise as could be asked for. Just use it.
Yeah.
Love it. Right. Well, thank you very much for joining us on Money Sense this morning, Brandon. It's been an absolute pleasure. Hope you've enjoyed yourself, and hope all our listeners have taken that final message loud and clear. Just use ChatGPT for a day and see what happens. Nothing bad will come of it, is what you're saying.
Nothing bad will come of it.
There you go. Nothing bad will come of it. If it does, Code K-Man, Brandon and Jason are your people to complain to. I'm absolutely joking. Thank you very much for joining us once again, and thank you to our listeners for tuning in. If any listener has any questions or topics they want us to cover, please email us at moneysense@cfacayman.ky. Otherwise, thank you again for tuning in, and please do join us again in 2 weeks' time.